Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a custom furniture maker who inherited my grandmother's house about 2 years ago. The place meant everything to me. It was where I spent summers as a kid, learning woodworking from my grandfather in his old garage workshop. The house sits on about 1.5 acres and was built back in the 1940s, long before the surrounding subdivision ever existed. When I moved in, I was immediately struck by how different my property looked compared to the cookie-cutter houses that surrounded it. My house had character, real hardwood floors, original crown molding, and a massive oak tree in the front yard that had to be at least 80 years old. The neighbors' houses all looked identical with their beige siding and tiny lawns. Within my first week, I received a welcome packet from something called the Serenity Meadows Homeowners Association. The packet included a thick booklet of rules and a bill for quarterly dues. I assumed this was mandatory since every other house in the area seemed to be part of this community. The rules were incredibly detailed and frankly ridiculous. Only 3 approved shades of beige for mailboxes, grass couldn't exceed 2.5 inches in height, and holiday decorations were limited to a pre-approved list of inflatable characters. Being new to the area and wanting to avoid conflict, I paid the dues and tried my best to follow their rules. I kept my lawn meticulously maintained, painted my mailbox the approved shade of beige, and even took down the handcrafted wooden birdhouses my grandfather had made because they weren't on the approved decoration list. The HOA president was a woman everyone called Carol. I quickly learned that she took her role very seriously, patrolling the neighborhood daily in her white golf cart with a clipboard and measuring tape. She would drive slowly past each house looking for violations. I once watched her get out of her cart to measure the height of someone's grass with an actual ruler. For about a year, I managed to fly under her radar. Then I decided to start the project I'd been planning since I inherited the house, converting my grandfather's old, dilapidated garage into a proper workshop for my furniture business. This wasn't going to be some cheap renovation. I hired an architect to design a beautiful conversion that would complement the main house while giving me a professional workspace. The plans included proper soundproofing, climate control, and even some decorative elements that matched the original 1940s architecture of the house. I did everything by the book. The city's book, that is. I applied for all the necessary permits through the city planning department. The process took about 6 weeks, but eventually I received full approval for the project. The city inspector even complimented the thoughtful design when he came out for the initial review. Construction started on a Monday morning. I was excited to finally begin this project that would honor my grandfather's memory while building my business. The contractors were professional and started by carefully removing the old garage door and beginning the foundation work for the new addition. By Wednesday afternoon, I found a violation notice taped to my front door. It was printed on official-looking letterhead and stated that I was in violation of Section 4.7 of the Community Covenants for unauthorized external modifications. The notice included a $500 fine and demanded that all work cease immediately until the project was submitted to and approved by the HOA Architectural Review Committee. I was confused and frustrated. I had spent thousands of dollars on permits and architectural plans, all of which had been approved by the city. I called the number on the notice and spoke with Carol directly. She explained that city permits were irrelevant and that all exterior modifications in the community required HOA approval first. She said I would need to submit my plans to the Architectural Review Committee and use only contractors from their pre-approved list. When I mentioned that construction was already underway, she became even more stern, insisting that the work stop immediately or additional fines would be imposed. I decided to attend the next monthly HOA meeting to resolve this misunderstanding. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile-looking building with fluorescent lighting and cheap folding chairs. Carol and 2 other board members sat at a raised table looking down at the handful of residents who attended. When my turn came to speak, I stood up and politely explained the situation. I brought copies of my city-approved permits and architectural plans, spreading them out on the table for everyone to see. I explained that this was a high-quality renovation that would actually improve the neighborhood's appearance. Carol barely glanced at the documents before pushing them back toward me. She said the city's permits were irrelevant because the HOA covenants superseded city ordinances on matters of aesthetics. She refused to even review the architectural plans, stating that the project was automatically denied because I hadn't used a pre-approved contractor. When I asked for a list of approved contractors, she handed me a single sheet of paper with 3 names on it. I later learned that all 3 contractors were either relatives of board members or paid kickbacks to the HOA for referrals. The other board members nodded along as Carol spoke. When she called for a vote on my request, all three voted to uphold the fine and deny my project. Carol looked directly at me and said that the rules existed to protect property values, and if I wanted to live somewhere with no rules, I shouldn't have moved to their community. I left the meeting feeling frustrated and confused. I had followed all the proper legal procedures, yet this group was telling me I couldn't improve my own property. I decided to continue with the construction, believing that they were acting outside their authority. That decision led to an escalating campaign of harassment. The fines began stacking up weekly. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, I would find a new violation notice on my door. The reasons became increasingly petty and ridiculous. First, they fined me for parking my work van in my own driveway overnight, claiming it was a commercial vehicle that violated residential parking rules. Then I received a notice for improper lawn maintenance because some leaves from my oak tree had blown onto the edge of my neighbor's lawn. When I put up a beautiful wooden reindeer that I had crafted myself for the holidays, they fined me for an unapproved decoration because it wasn't an inflatable character from their approved list. The harassment reached a new level when Carol started driving past my house multiple times per day, sometimes stopping to take pictures. She would measure the height of my grass and examine my mailbox with a magnifying glass. My neighbors began avoiding eye contact when I saw them outside, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but afraid to speak up. After 3 months of this treatment, I received a certified letter from a law firm representing the HOA. The letter stated that my fines had accumulated to over $4,000 and that the HOA had placed a lien on my property. They threatened foreclosure proceedings if I didn't pay immediately and cease all construction activities. This threat changed everything for me. What had started as a neighborhood dispute was now a serious legal threat to my family home. I realized I needed to fight back, but I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with first. I started spending my evenings and weekends at the county records office, poring over property deeds, development plans, and subdivision maps. The records clerk, an older woman who had worked there for decades, was helpful in explaining how to navigate the filing system. I learned to read plat maps and understand the legal language in property documents. After days of searching through dusty binders and microfilm records, I found something that made my heart race. It was the original master plan for the Serenity Meadows subdivision, filed in 1973. The developer's tract of land was clearly outlined, but sitting right in the middle was a small parcel with a hand-drawn box around it. Next to the box was a notation that read, Lot A, existing parcel, exempt from CC and Rs. I stared at the document for several minutes, hardly believing what I was seeing. My property, my grandmother's original homestead, was specifically exempted from the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that governed the HOA the developer had been forced to build around the existing property and had never incorporated it into the association's jurisdiction. I made copies of everything and took my findings to a property law attorney. He was a sharp, experienced lawyer who had handled similar cases before. When I showed him the documents, his eyes lit up with excitement. He confirmed that the exemption was legally binding and that the HOA had absolutely no authority over my property. The attorney explained that not only had they been illegally extorting money from me, but they had also committed fraud by placing a lien on property they had no legal claim to. He advised me to stop paying dues immediately and ignore all future correspondence from the HOA. His strategy was simple. Let them sue and force them to prove their authority in court, knowing full well they couldn't. Over the next few months, the threatening letters continued. The HOA law firm sent increasingly aggressive demands for payment. I followed my attorney's advice and ignored them all. Carol's harassment intensified as well. She began leaving violation notices almost daily, sometimes for completely fabricated infractions like excessive bird feeding because I had put up a bird feeder. Finally, the HOA made the mistake I was waiting for. They filed a lawsuit to foreclose on my property. They were so confident in their authority that they never bothered to verify their legal standing. They walked right into the trap my attorney had set. The court date was set for a Thursday morning in late spring. I arrived at the courthouse feeling nervous, but prepared. Carol and the other board members were there in their best clothes, whispering confidently with their attorney. They looked like they were attending a social event rather than a legal proceeding. The HOA lawyer presented what seemed like a straightforward case. He explained that I lived in Serenity Meadows and had refused to pay required fines and dues as outlined in the community's governing documents. He showed the judge copies of their covenants and the accumulated fines, painting me as a defiant homeowner who thought the rules didn't apply to him. When it was our turn, my attorney stood up calmly. He didn't argue about the workshop or dispute the fines. Instead, he asked the HOA lawyer a simple question. Could he please present the document that legally subjected my specific property to the Serenity Meadows covenants? The HOA lawyer looked confused and shuffled through his papers. Carol whispered urgently to him from the gallery. He presented the general HOA agreement that all homeowners had signed. My attorney objected, pointing out that the document only applied to actual members of the HOA, which I was not. Then my attorney presented the certified copy of the original master plat. He had arranged for it to be projected onto a screen so everyone in the courtroom could see the exemption notation clearly. The room fell silent as the judge examined the document carefully. The judge's expression grew stern as he looked directly at the HOA and their counsel. He asked the HOA attorney if he had been aware of this exemption before filing the lawsuit. The lawyer admitted he had not reviewed the original subdivision documents. The judge dismissed the HOA lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they could never file it again. But my attorney wasn't finished. He immediately moved forward with our countersuit for fraud, harassment, and illegal collection practices. The judge's final ruling exceeded even my expectations. He ordered the HOA to immediately remove the illegal lien from my property and repay every dollar of dues I had ever paid with interest. They were also required to pay 100% of my legal fees and an additional $20,000 in punitive damages for their harassment campaign. The total judgment against the HOA was over $50,000. To pay it, they were forced to issue a special assessment to every homeowner in the community. Carol had to stand up at the next HOA meeting and announce that everyone's dues would double for the next year to cover the costs of their failed lawsuit against me. The community was furious. Homeowners who had been quietly suffering under Carol's tyrannical rule suddenly found their voices. At the next election, Carol was voted out by the largest margin in the community's history. 2 of the other board members resigned rather than face similar humiliation. I finished my workshop renovation without any further interference. It turned out beautifully, a perfect blend of modern functionality and classic architecture that actually enhanced the character of my property. My furniture business has thrived, and several neighbors have even commissioned pieces from me. As a final touch, I installed a large abstract metal sculpture in my front yard, something I designed and created myself. It's a beautiful piece that catches the light at different times of day, but it's exactly the kind of thing the old HOA would have had a fit over. My property line has become an invisible wall that they can't cross. Every time I see one of my neighbors now, they give me a little nod of respect. Because I didn't just win my freedom, I exposed the tyrants they had all been living under, and that was the sweetest victory of all. The new HOA board operates much differently. They focus on actual community maintenance rather than petty rule enforcement. They've even amended the covenants to eliminate many of the more ridiculous restrictions that Carol had insisted on. Sometimes I sit in my workshop in the evening surrounded by the tools my grandfather taught me to use, working on a piece of furniture that will last for generations. The sound of my machinery doesn't bother anyone because the workshop is properly soundproofed. The large windows look out over my exempt property where I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. The oak tree in my front yard still drops leaves that occasionally blow onto my neighbors' lawns. But nobody measures my grass anymore, and nobody cares what color my mailbox is painted. The metal sculpture catches the sunset light, casting interesting shadows across the yard that changes throughout the year. Carol moved away about 6 months after losing her position. I heard she tried to become involved with the HOA in her new community, but was quickly shut down when word spread about what had happened here. The new neighbors who bought her house are a lovely young couple who appreciate living next to someone who stood up for property rights. The whole experience taught me that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. It also showed me the importance of doing your research and understanding your legal rights. Most importantly, it proved that bullies in positions of power can be defeated when you have the law on your side and the courage to see it through to the end. Update. 1 year later, I thought you might want to know how things have played out since my last post. A lot has happened in the past year, and I wanted to share some of the more interesting developments. First, the financial impact on the community was even more severe than I initially reported. The special assessment to cover the $50,000 judgment wasn't the end of their financial troubles. It turns out that Carol and the previous board had been making other questionable decisions that came to light after my case. The new board discovered that Carol had been paying herself and her cronies excessive compensation for their HOA roles, money that should have gone toward community maintenance. They had also signed several overpriced contracts with vendors who were giving them kickbacks. The community had to hire a forensic accountant to untangle the mess. The total cost of Carol's mismanagement ended up being close to $100,000. The special assessments continued for almost 8 months, with some homeowners paying an extra $300 per month on top of their regular dues. Several residents ended up selling their homes because they couldn't afford the additional costs, but here's where it gets really interesting. 3 other homeowners in the community discovered that their properties might also have exemptions or special status. Inspired by my research, they started digging through the county records themselves. One found that their lot had never been properly incorporated into the HOA due to a surveying error from the 1970s. Another discovered that their property had a utility easement that voided certain HOA restrictions. The new HOA board, trying to avoid further legal disasters, has become much more conservative about enforcement. They've basically adopted a policy of not pursuing any violation unless it poses an actual safety hazard or significantly impacts neighboring properties. The days of measuring grass height and nitpicking mailbox colors are over. My business has absolutely taken off since the court case. Word spread about what happened, and I started getting calls from people all over the region who wanted furniture made by the guy who beat his HOA. I've had to hire 2 part-time assistants and am considering expanding into the space above my workshop. The metal sculpture in my front yard has become something of a local landmark. People drive by just to see it, and I've had several art collectors inquire about commissioning similar pieces. I never expected to become known for my sculpture work, but it's opened up a whole new revenue stream. Carol's story has an interesting twist too. About 6 months after she moved away, I received a call from a lawyer in her new state. Apparently, she tried the same aggressive tactics with her new HOA, and ended up in legal trouble there as well. The lawyer was gathering information about her previous behavior for their case. I was happy to provide documentation of her harassment campaign against me. From what I heard through the grapevine, Carol ended up having to pay significant damages in that case too, and was banned from serving on any HOA board in her new community. It seems like her pattern of behavior finally caught up with her. The county has also made some changes based on what happened in our case. They now require HOA lawyers to verify their authority over specific properties before filing liens or foreclosure actions. They've also created a mediation program for HOA disputes to try to resolve conflicts before they escalate to court. My attorney has become something of a local celebrity in property law circles. He's given several presentations to legal associations about HOA overreach and has taken on similar cases in other communities. He told me that my case has become a textbook example of why HOA need to understand the limits of their authority. The relationship with my actual neighbors has improved dramatically. Without Carol's reign of terror, people are much more relaxed and friendly. We've started having informal block parties where people actually talk to each other instead of hiding behind their curtains afraid of getting violation notices. One of the funniest developments is that the new HOA board actually consulted with me before making changes to the community landscaping. They wanted to make sure their plans wouldn't conflict with any property boundaries or easements. The woman who replaced Carol as president is a retired teacher who believes in collaboration rather than confrontation. My workshop has hosted several community events over the past year. I've taught woodworking classes for local kids and held demonstrations for adults interested in learning traditional craftsmanship. It's been rewarding to share the skills my grandfather taught me and to see people create something beautiful with their own hands. The oak tree in my front yard had to have some maintenance work done last fall. A few large branches were threatening to fall during storms. Instead of just having them removed, I had them milled into lumber and used the wood to create a memorial bench for my grandfather. It sits under the tree where he used to read his newspaper every morning. I've also started documenting the history of my property and the surrounding area. I found old photographs and property records going back to the 1920s when this was all farmland. I'm putting together a small book about the transformation of rural areas into suburban communities and the importance of preserving historical properties. The legal precedent for my case has been cited in several other HOA disputes across the state. My attorney says it's helped other property owners who were facing similar situations with overreaching associations. It feels good to know that standing up for my rights helped protect others as well. Looking back, I'm grateful for the whole experience, as stressful as it was at the time. It forced me to learn about property law, local government, and my own rights as a homeowner. It also showed me that you don't have to accept bullying just because someone claims to have authority over you. The workshop my grandfather would have been proud of is complete. My business is thriving, and my property remains exactly as it should be. Mine to do with as I please within the bounds of actual law. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that not only solve your own problems, but make things better for everyone around you. And yes, I still get a little smile every time I drive past the community clubhouse where Carol used to hold court. It's been converted into a actual community center now, with exercise classes and social events instead of kangaroo court proceedings. Progress comes in many forms, but it always starts with someone willing to stand up and say enough. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I'm a high school student, and this happened to me in ninth grade. I'm sorry for any grammatical errors because English is not my first language. My teacher decided that I should compete in a math competition because she saw potential in me. I agree because she was my favorite teacher. I did not really care that much because I was kinda lazy at that time. On the day of the competition, I saw a kid, let's call him Entitled Kid, boasting about how he didn't sleep because he reviewed everything. I was annoyed, but I didn't really think much of it. The results came. Sure enough, he won. But I got second place. I was shocked and happy at the same time, and so was my teacher. Everything was all sunshine and rainbows until I heard this lady, entitled mom. Good thing that girl didn't win. I was only 2 points behind. This is a math competition. My boy should win. He studied really hard for this, and a girl shouldn't beat him. I was livid. My teacher patted my back and told me to not listen to her. When they announced that I was in second place, entitled mom started booing. This woman, I couldn't take it. So I devised a plan. This competition happened every year according to my teacher, and in grade 10 there was a regionals competition after. I swore that I had to win next year. The whole year, I taught myself various math equations, and my friend helped me with everything. I spent a whole year reviewing just to prove this entitled mother wrong. The next year, I entered the competition more ready than ever. I saw the boy again. Now even his mother is boasting about how he couldn't sleep knowing that he was going to win again, and that he is excited about the regionals. Everything she said just encouraged me to do better. The exam was kinda hard, but I managed to answer most of the test questions while I heard entitled kids said it wasn't that hard. I was not confident that I would win, but I was hoping. The announcements came and they said only one got a score of 40 and above in every grade level. The entitled kid was smirking, thinking it was him and telling his mom, "Regionals, here we go." But to his surprise, I won. The look of shock in entitled mom and entitled kid's face was worth it. They didn't utter a word. His teacher was just standing there, shocked. I gave them a big-ass smirk and went up the stage, accepting the prize and everything. When I went down the stage, I saw entitled mom crying and saying my boy was supposed to win. He was supposed to go to the regionals. And once I heard her cries of agony, the whole year of reviewing was paid off. I got second place in the regional, and I became friends with the guy in first place. Overall, it was a great experience, and I'm glad that I don't have to see entitled mom and entitled kid again because there is no math competition in grade 11. The next one is a malicious compliance story. In the early years of being a pharmacist, jobs in my city were hard to come by. I managed to get full-time hours by working for a couple of pharmacist friends at both of their stores. They would work out my schedule together and put an X on my schedule on the days I was at the opposing store. One store was downtown and one was in the suburb I lived in. At the suburb pharmacy, I had a coworker, D, who could just not wrap her brain around the fact that if there was an X by my name, I was in fact working, just at the other store. Multiple times I would have call after call on my cell phone and hang-ups on my answering machine at home because she wanted me to cover her shift at the suburb store when I was already working downtown. Worst thing was my cell phone charged me for every single call, so after the second time of her pulling this, I would get downtown and immediately pull the battery off my phone. This made her angry at me for ignoring her, and we had a tepid relationship after that. Time went on and the suburb store started expanding their nursing home operation, so I was able to work there full-time instead. I still had a great relationship with the downtown store, and they had me keep the keys in case of emergencies. They would occasionally come up and the X would be on the schedule by my name. Sadly, D became the assistant manager and now thought she was the boss of me. Now, downtown pharmacist's daughter was getting married and suburb pharmacist was invited to all the festivities. I got scheduled to work the Thursday before at the downtown store. The X went by my name on the suburb schedule. I was also going to the wedding. I was good friends with the daughter, but missing the Mendy party on the Thursday I was working for her mom. I was on the phone with her on my break one time, and she was saying how sorry she was I was missing it, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll just doodle brown Sharpie all over my hands and pretend I was there when we aren't busy." Now at that exact week, we were getting new pharmacy software downloaded. Nursing homes are run on a batch system where all the labels are run about 5 days before and then all the bubble packs are made up during that time, and then the actual billing is done on the Thursday for the meds to be delivered Friday. Dee decided that she did not want the batch to be done and just wanted everything to be processed and made up on the Thursday for just this first week. My technician was freaking out, so I just told her to make up the usual drug cards. Lipitor, aspirin 81, multivitamin, Altase, etc. without any patient data just to help speed things along. Dee overheard and told the tech that she wasn't allowed to do that, and this younger generation is just scared of hard work. I panicked a bit because I was the only one of my age, Gen X, as all my coworkers were boomer-aged or older. I went and checked the schedule. Yep, there's an X by my name. I won't be there for the **T show, but somehow Dee thinks I am. Why should I tell her any different? Thursday rolls around and at 12:30 my cell phone starts blowing up. It's in my purse in the safe because I don't get a lunch break, only Pharmacist, and everyone can hear it. Out comes the battery. I get home after work and there's screaming and swearing on my answering machine. A locum pharmacist worked the morning shift and wasn't instructed to do anything, so everything was left for Dee when she arrived at 12:30. She had to work late to finish over 500 prescription drug cards. I come in the next day and she's still furious. You said you were working. I heard you talking about the effing Mendai thing. I told her I was working, just not at that store, as evidenced by the X by my name. I learned then that she could eavesdrop on the break room from one place in the pharmacy, when she herself was the only pharmacist working at the time. All my breaks were taken in my car after this. The next one is an entitled people story. My wife has an entitled coworker acquaintance. I use the term acquaintance as she does run in our friend circle, but we try to limit or avoid contact with her. We will call her Carrie. Anyways, Carrie is known for bullying coworkers at work, saying that she can get people fired. She can't. Screaming at people and at large, just general bad behavior. Her favorite thing to intimidate people with is to tell them to duck around and find out. This is important for later. So Carrie had a duck buddy. Nothing serious, just a guy she would bang and kick out the door. Carrie is also notorious for collecting engagement rings. She would begin dating a guy, get a ring from them, get them to pay off some bill for her, then kick them to the curb. Again, I bring this up only as context to her character and to reinforce that the duck buddy guy meant nothing to her. As she didn't date him nor tried getting a ring from him, she used him then kick him to the curb whenever someone with money showed her attention. She would also frequently talk crap about this guy behind his back. So Carrie was on one of her short-term engagements, so the duck buddy, let's call him Bill, was currently not someone she was seeing as the new guy just bought her a $6,000 ring. I'm serious, she collected engagement rings like they were Pokemon, and paid 10 grand to get her roof fixed. So she was happy with this guy and had no interest at all in Bill. Enter Mandy. Mandy is another co-worker of my wife and Carrie. I personally don't know her, but from what I've been told is she just got out of a 15-year marriage where she wasn't allowed to do anything and was very controlled. Carrie and Mandy are friends, drinking buddies. Carrie likes to drink a lot, and by I mean all the time. But nevertheless, they were on good terms. So randomly, Mandy meets Bill. Mandy doesn't know Bill's history with Carrie, nor knows that GE even knows her. They hit it off really good, and they are getting along so well that they begin dating, and it blossoms into a great relationship, one that's built on respect and love. Carrie finds out, and she loses her ducking mind. Again, she never dated Bill, never wanted to date Bill. She never had any interest in him besides sex. Hell, she currently engaged to a guy. But Mandy took her man, and she let the world know about it. Carrie started by going to their boss daily and asking him, "Why does that little idiot still work here?" She would also loudly exclaim this on the work floor for all to hear. Also, Carrie spent a whole hour yelling and screaming at her for some Mandy didn't even do. Carrie would also frequently harass them both when they were out and about in town. She would loudly call her a idiot, slut, idiot, and just all the nasty things you can say about someone. She would not only loudly say these things in their proximity, but tell anyone that would listen, or not listen. Basically anyone around her. How she was wronged by Mandy and Bill, and what she thought about it, and that Mandy is ducking around, so she going to find out. Fast forward 2 months. Mandy and Bill are still together and extremely happy. Carrie is not surprisingly no longer engaged to that guy. Also not surprisingly has already been engaged to another guy and married after a week. It was unfortunately the 2-year anniversary of the passing of a mutual friend of all parties involved. Carrie is using this time to take the week off of work to drink. This is a whole other can of worms. Basically, she isn't close to this person who passed as she claims to be. But anyways, once work is over, everyone else goes to the bar to have a drink to celebrate the departed life. So again, once Carrie, after 2 full days of drinking, see Mandy, she begins to let into her again with all the shaming stuff. Mandy, finally having enough of it, attempts to talk to Carrie in an attempt to reconcile. Carrie is having none of this and keeps calling her names and proceeds to tell her that Mandy is ducking around and is going to find out, and ends it with calling her an idiot. Well, I'm guessing something snapped and Mandy straight snapped and threw a beer bottle straight at her, hitting her in the face. Imagine the cop in The Big Lebowski throwing the coffee cup, knocking her on her ass. There is a slight pause and someone I don't know who pipes up. It looks like you were the one that ducked around and found out. Carrie, obviously stunned, gets up and leaves. So the next day she showed up to work with a very obvious black eye. She isn't saying anything to Mandy, but going to everyone else complaining that she was the victim. Not understanding that everyone been watching her bully this poor girl for the last few months, and that kind of it. Nothing else has happened since then, but if it does, I'll let you know. Sorry this got long-winded. Anyway, thank you for watching.